the way, we invite you to ask them using the text chat box over to the right-hand side of your screen. So, Richard, take it away.
Thanks, Steve. Hi there. Teaching writing has always been a core part of the literacy curriculum. If we check out the new Australian curriculum, for example, and use Year 4 as a sampler, we read, understand differences between the language of opinion and feeling and the language of factual reporting and recording. Use meta-language to describe the effects of ideas, text structures, and language features of literary texts. Discuss how authors and illustrators make stories exciting, moving, and absorbing, and hold readers' interest by using various techniques, for example, character development and plot tension. Create literary text that explores students' own experiences and imagining. Identify characteristic features used in imaginative, informative, and persuasive text to meet the purpose of the text. Understanding how texts work is vital knowledge for its own sake and as a platform on which students can build their own writing. However, teaching how to construct a text has always been a difficult task, I know as a teacher. To take stories as an instance, much about the internal construction of a story is complex. Most children are familiar with the terms character or plot, but knowing how to build them is another matter. Ziptales has responded to this challenge in two ways. As you will know, we have a large suite of lessons pegged to the Australian curriculum. One of the 3 modules is entirely devoted to writing. Here you will find more than 60 lessons. Examples. What's in a story? Years 1 and 2. Imaginative texts. Years 3 and 4. What is a paragraph? Years 3 and 4. Who is telling the story? Years 3 and 4. Creating an information report? Years 5 and 6. Topic sentences? Years 5 and 6. Refining editing skills? Years 5 and 6. But even more refined than these are the suite of lessons called Write Time. The approach here is to offer highly explicit teaching of all key components, graphically illustrated to aid comprehension for all the major text types. We use lots of dot points and animations. We also favour mnemonics, such as the 3 Ps of effective storytelling or the pyramid of power when it comes to informative writing and other such focused learning devices. The lessons would play comfortably across the middle and upper school, depending on the teacher's assessment of his/her own class. Let's look at them now. How to write a story. We begin by reminding children in graphic form what a narrative actually amounts to. Then we ask, is there a formula for writing stories? We then present an answer in 2 stages. First, we ask teachers to take the class to a separate lesson entitled Deconstructing a Story, in which we break down a full narrative, Paddy Saves the Day, into all its component parts, each carefully annotated. Then we introduce children to the 3 Ps of narrative. People, trying to solve a problem, equals plot. The first key narrative element is people. Using the story already analysed, we talk about characters and how to construct them. They must be believable. The lesson gives examples. We want to know what drives the characters to act and give it its proper name, motivation. The second key narrative element is problem. We demonstrate various types of problems, all available within the Ziptales library. The third key narrative element is plot. Here we show how, in the sample story, Paddy Saves the Day, the various stages of the narrative are played out. We then move on to the 3 S's of exciting storytelling. Show it, speak it, surprise them. This part of the lesson delves into the importance of detail, dialogue, and the need for narrative twists. Examples are given of each. Don't forget the Australian curriculum lessons too, such as What's in a Story and Making Stories Interesting, Years 1 and 2, Imaginative Texts, Years 3 and 4, and Creating of Imaginative Texts, Years 5 and 6. How to write arguments. This lesson begins by defining the special use of the word argument as used by schools, in its sense of persuading people through logic. We first introduced the word contention. Examples are given of good and bad contentions. We remind children that a contention should be a call to action. Next, we deal with the importance of reasons. Here, a graphic is used to show how building an argument is rather like constructing a building. It needs clear and strong supports. The topic of "we should all protect our environment" is used as an illustration. Such supports, or structural underpinnings, need evidence. The nature of acceptable evidence is then discussed. Finally, the lesson deals with the types of persuasive language that are available. Detailed examples are presented with annotations. And to end with, the matter of structure is covered. In writing an argument piece, children need to be aware of the types of paragraph that are needed: introduction paragraph, body paragraphs, conclusion paragraph. Don't forget the Australian curriculum lessons too, such as how are texts organised, Years 1 and 2, types of texts, Years 3 and 4, and finding the main idea, Years 5 and 6. How to write essays. The term essay is more often seen in the secondary context, but it can be implied in the Australian curriculum descriptor. Analyse how text structures and language features work together to meet the purpose of a text. Year 6, literacy, interpreting, analysing, evaluating. Teachers asking students to read and interpret common media presentations will unavoidably encounter essays, so we offer these too as a writing option. We begin with the obvious question: why is it called an essay? The answer, of course, is that the word is French and can be traced quite specifically to Michel de Montaigne, whose famous book of essays is the only volume known to have been in Shakespeare's library. The lesson swiftly moves on to the types of essays surrounding us: expository, argumentative, personal, and literary. Having established the parameters of the text type, we move rapidly on to topic analysis, planning, and drafting. At this point, a specific example is needed. The topic, "There is no such thing as a typical Australian," provides the necessary ground for analysis. This topic is shown being broken down into a series of questions, or with illustrations, for maximum impact. Having done a sample topic analysis, the lesson proceeds to demonstrate the planning stage. The importance of evidence is now outlined. Without specifics to back up a child's general assertions on the topic, the writing is unconvincing. The audience will not be satisfied. A full introductory paragraph is presented as a sample. This leads naturally on to the subject of paragraphs, with the concept of a topic sentence and supporting sentences clearly enunciated. The notion of specialised paragraphs is examined in detail with samples. Finally, the lesson deals with tried and true methods for improving an essay: quotes from experts, statistics, anecdotes, case studies, loaded language, humour. The lesson ends with a troubleshooting guide. How to write about information. The text type informative is everywhere in the curriculum. For example, draft, plan and publish informative texts demonstrating increased control over text structures and language features appropriate to the audience and purpose. Year 3, literacy, creating texts. The same rubric can be found at almost all levels. Zip Tales offers plenty of information texts. True Tales offers 12 factual pieces. The Advanced Library adds 9 pieces under its information, biography and expository sets. And both Write Time and Skill Builder are full of information pieces, 24 or more. However, on the assumption that children will never learn the rudiments by raw observation alone, this lesson tackles informative writing head-on. A topic is introduced immediately: dinosaurs. The knee-jerk reaction of many children would be to start research without further ado, so the lesson diverts them to a reliable method. 1. Organise your ideas. 2. Research the topic. 3. Present the information. The topic, dinosaurs, is then broken down into a series of questions. What were dinosaurs? What sort existed? How long ago did they live? Etc. The recommended method is one of generating key questions to which the children then need to find answers. This dovetails neatly into the research, which is the next step. Advice is offered on the research stage, moving between book and internet research into a recommendation that children use people they know. We then come to the matter of presentation. The lesson suggests that children resolve this into two key questions. What do your audience already know? How difficult is the topic? Examples are provided, amphibians and explaining the universe. Next, the lesson moves into advice about structuring a presentation. It outlines the well-known method of attention grabbing, get them in, preview, tell them what you're going to tell them, presentation, tell them, review, tell them what you've told them. The language is kept simple to make these necessary stages really clear. Finally, there is advice on presentation techniques. The pyramid of power. A graphic is shown which puts the different modes into perspective. Words, diagrams, pictures, moving pictures, and demonstrations, making it clear that the more visual material a child can use, the greater the impact on the audience. Don't forget as well about the Australian curriculum lessons we provide, such as how are texts organised, years 1 and 2, information text, years 3 and 4, and information report, years 5 and 6. How to write instructions. One of the things children need to be able to do is to create instructions or to write procedurally. This is several times referred to in the curriculum. For example, writing and entering a simple set of instructions jointly to sequence events and instructions, for example, ordering significant personal events or milestones and describing the steps involved in the process. That's to be found in Digital Technologies Foundation to Year 2. Now, ZipTales has a whole functionality or area of its library devoted to procedural texts. It's called Make and Do. However, while working through one of the projects outlined there, such as making a sock puppet or origami, will exercise the skill, it will not teach how to do it. This lesson, in Right Time, teaches instructional writing. Instructions start with the ingredients. Two ways of doing this are explained: lists and illustrations with labels. Then there is the matter of the process. An analogy is made in the lesson to stepping stones. These trace a path. Instructions too need a path. A visual representation of this is given, showing how numbered steps make things clearer. The next thing discussed is how to make difficult technical matters understandable. The sample used is explaining how to make a 3D Christmas decoration, a very, very complex task. Trying to describe something really complicated like that in words alone is modelled. We show a little example of how difficult it is to understand, followed by doing the same job with a picture and labelling, which makes the point that to do that, of course, is to make it so much clearer to the reader. The difference between diagrams and photos is illustrated, so they have those two options. Finally, in the lesson, advice is given on how to keep the language simple so that readers or viewers don't lose the sense. How to write poetry. Poetry too is everywhere in the curriculum. For example, identify, reproduce and experiment with rhythmic, sound and word patterns in poems, chants, rhymes and songs. That's to be found in Examining Literature, Year 2. Or understand, interpret and experiment with a range of devices and deliberate wordplay in poetry and other literary texts. For example, nonsense words, spoonerisms, neologisms and puns. That's to be found in Examining Literature, Year 4. As you will know, ZipTales has its own special poetry suite, Rhyme Time. As well as the 12 classic poems presented there with high-quality readings by trained actors, there is a wealth of lesson plans and worksheets. However, teaching the writing of poetry is another matter. In the Right Time set, we take the approach of offering a set of options to teachers. Inside the topic poetry, you will see 12 types of poem. There is an explanation of how to build the type of poem, of the 12 that is, with a full example to model it. Each one with a voiced reading, and then of course a set of lesson plan items so teachers can follow up in their classes. The average level is approximately Year 2 to Year 4. Within Right Time, we cover the following: alliteration, definition poems, cinquains, haiku. Did you know that the haiku pattern is 5, then 7, then 5 syllables? Diamond poems, question poems, feeling poems, building a poem, a simple pattern to use on any subject, shape poems, counting rhymes, descriptive poems, recipes. Again, a simple formula to follow. Combining one or more of these options with a series of lessons exploiting the resources in rhyme time will bring children up to speed on verse writing quite painlessly. Some teachers are uncomfortable with poetry, but these lessons will yield quite beautiful material with a minimum of effort. And don't forget the Australian curriculum lessons we have on this subject too, such as studying poetry, years 1 and 2. What does a poem look like? Years 3 and 4. And engaging with poetry and visual imagery, years 5 and 6. How to write recounts. As early as year 1, the text type recount is mandated. For example, becoming familiar with the typical stages of types of text, including recount and procedure. Year 1, language, text structure, and organisation. Or choosing vocabulary and sentence structures for particular purposes and audiences to meet the perceived audience needs, such as recounting an excursion to a younger class or welcoming a visitor to a school function. Year 6, literacy, interacting with others. The lesson on recounts starts with an example of a personal narrative. The brief story offered is about a skydiver who narrowly escapes serious injury. The recount is only 160 words long, but it's a white-knuckle account. It's quite exciting. Using that passage as a launching point, the lesson defines the main stages of a recount. Beginning, or exposition as it's often called, middle, or development, and end, or resolution. The skydiving example is analysed to show where these stages occur. Since children are often, without direction, inclined to regurgitate unconnected events, as in, then we went to see the elephant, then we saw the gorillas, then we had lunch, then we went to the butterfly house, then we listened to the animal doctor, then we got on the bus and went home. You'll recognise that sort of style. Because that's a typical default situation for kids, we, in the lesson, make the point that a structure is necessary. This is made plain with a pair of contrasting plot lines, as we call them. Needless to say, some recounts can be plot-free, but we feel it's best to give children a more dramatic example as a source of inspiration. Tugging them gently in the direction of more narratively aware writing will be a boon to teachers and a source of pleasure for the children. Examples are given of where to find ideas for recounts. The lesson moves on to a series of important ideas for getting the most out of the writing. Each of these comes with its own sample passage. Diving in. We explain the classic literary technique of in media res. Drama. A short explanation of why conflict is so important. Dialogue. A simple piece is presented in which voices bring the recount to life. Detail. How sensory data can enliven a piece. In finishing, there is advice on how to finish a recount. What did you learn from the experience? Did you change as a result of this experience? Was there a moral to the story? What about a quote which sums up the point of the recount? The lesson ends with a useful summing up. I trust you've found this a useful introduction to what Ziptails offers for the writing curriculum. To sum up, if you combine the 60-odd mini-lessons in our Australian curriculum suite with the 8 fuller and more complex lessons in Write Time, you can be confident of having more than enough to successfully guide your children through the complexities of this vital part of your program.
All right. Sorry, having a few issues with the microphone there. Thank you, Richard. That was very insightful. And just so everyone knows, the Right Time module is accessible in the Extending library for all of you out there who are already Ziptail members. If you're new to Ziptails, you're welcome to go to our website at ziptails.com and sign up for a free trial. And just so everyone knows, the PDs that you'll be getting after this webinar will be emailed to you all. If you're sitting around in a staff room at the moment, and there's lots of other staff there with you, all you need to do is email us, support@ziptails.com, and we'll email all of your PDs out to you all. So if you could send us an email with the list of teachers that you have there and also all of your email addresses, and we'll make sure you all get it. Now, we have a few questions coming in, and any other questions that you have, all you need to do is use the chat window to the right-hand side of your screen. Richard, you ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
All right, so we got one here from, who's this one? Jane in Victoria. Now, does your Australian curriculum module on writing come with lesson plans or activities?
Yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Good question, Jane. Yes, that was something I kept mentioning throughout the webinar, because the Australian curriculum lessons, 144 in all, are really important resource, and you really should know about them. They cover all levels from foundation to year 6, foundation or kindergarten to year 6. Now, the question that you asked was about are there lesson plans with those curriculum modules? Yes, there are. Well, let's call them activities rather than lesson plans. So, for example, imaginative text, which I think was the one I used as an example, which is a year 3-4 lesson, has 4 sets of activities, which include, from memory, things like they have to read us one of the stories and talk about how it is constructed. Then they have to rewrite a popular story, which they've discussed as a class, and change the setting, change everything, modify it basically. And then they present it as a play or a slideshow or whatever. So a whole set of activities which essentially work on the key ideas, and those activities, as we call them in that suite, are really, you just click on the last page on the word activities and they pop up and you can print them off. So yes, it's a really, the whole suite of lessons is terribly important, but there are plenty of activities. You'll have more than enough to go on with.
Beautiful. And we've just had a question in from Margaret. Where is she from? From Queensland. Do you have any ideas for getting preppies writing?
The foundation part of that same curriculum, Australian curriculum suite, is in fact a really good place to look. I recommend you go there. We took a lot of trouble with those foundation lessons, which from memory are about 24, so quite a lot of lessons covering just about everything in the curriculum at that level, foundation or kindergarten in New South Wales. And in that case, there is very little text on screen because, of course, often these kids can't read. The voiceover, however, carries them through each lesson and shows them lots of little animations. So it animates the 3 pigs or whatever it may be. And at the end of each lesson is the activity I referred to a moment ago, which of course is where you work on the concept.
Fantastic. Thanks, Richard. And another question from Lucas in Melbourne. Are the lessons sectional to allow for using parts of lessons in an integrated way during the one lesson?
I hope I understand what you're asking, Lucas. In other words, you can stop and start. I think that's probably what you're saying. Effectively, if you like the lesson in Right Time, if you choose to use Right Time, or the lesson in the Australian curriculum set, they are basically packages of information with the attendant activities put together. You can, of course, go through a lesson, stop it wherever you like, go back a page, go forward a page, talk about it, pause wherever you like. Let's call it pause, and then go on to the lesson and then do the activities. You can't, if that's part of the question, you can't, however, disassemble the lesson. In other words, you can't take the first 3 pages and use them and ignore the rest. I mean, you can effectively ignore the rest, but that would mean you can't export the first 3 pages. If that's, I think, what you're asking.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. We've got one here from Mark in New South Wales. Does the How to Write a Story lesson in Right Time have a sample by any chance?
Yes, it does. That's a really good question. Clearly, you need a sample to talk about stories. The actual lesson itself, inside Right Time, has that story that you may recall. Paddy saves the day, which is analysed basically to the last detail. It's broken down very, very carefully so the kids can see how it's put together, so they can then reconstruct their own story using the key ideas. However, I'd like to also say to Mark that the next webinar coming up, which is only 3 weeks away effectively, the 18th of June, which is called Teaching the Art of Narrative Writing, is all about story writing. That's nothing else. And that, in fact, not only gives you lots of information about tricks for teaching narrative writing, but we'll have as an add-on a full-length story called Happy Birthday, which is broken down and annotated in full, so teachers can use that as a sampler with kids. So just to remind you, 18th of June is the next webinar, and it's all about narrative writing.
Thank you. And just a couple more questions coming in. Is there a sample answer to go with the how to write an argument lesson? That's from Leonie up in Queensland again.
Yes, there is. Great. And I'm pleased to say this, Leonie, that yes, there is. It's available as an add-on to this webinar, today's webinar, in other words. Now, it's already produced. It's called Writing Persuasive Texts, and it gives you a full script, something like, I think it's about 5 or 6 paragraphs, and it's annotated, so you can see the topic sentences. There's a little annotation for each paragraph. That is an add-on to today's webinar called Writing Persuasive Texts, and it's I think it's going to be available tomorrow. Steve?
Yeah, we'll make sure we send it out to everyone as well. Fantastic. From Judy in South Australia, informational writing is important. How much informational text type material is there on ZipTales?
Yeah, it's actually a question that teachers often ask, Steve. Informational text, very important, of course. We've covered informational texts to quite a reasonable extent, and I would urge you, if we could send this out, Steve. There's a thing which we've recently produced to answer that question from one school, which we call ZipTales and Text Types, which is just a 2-page document identifying all the different text types. And it basically, for information text, for example, talks about the various places you can find informational texts in ZipTales. It even gives you a count of the number of lessons. So that's worth having a look at. That's called ZipTales and Text Types, and we can send that out to people in this webinar too, I think. I'm sure we can.
I'll make sure I do that as well. We got one here from Marg. Not sure where Marg's from. Sorry, Marg. But she's asking, can you pay to use parts of ZipTales, for example, poetry? Also, what is the cost for a single teacher? I think we'll let Marg know the prices after this.
Yes, okay.
But the answer, can you use parts of ZipTales? Can you pay for a separate area of ZipTales?
Put it this way, I think ZipTales is really an online library, a digital library. And we really offer it to the school as a whole package, because essentially it's literacy, reading and writing, basically for all levels in the primary school. And essentially we see it as a package we offer to schools. Now, if schools are having difficulty, I think, with budgets, we can certainly talk about that. We can be very understanding, but essentially we don't have access to bits of ZipTales. Visualize it as a digital library, a huge library. You go in, you can go anywhere in that library. It's not sort of little rooms that you unlock one by one. Anyway, we'll get in touch, Marg, and we'll explain in greater detail and talk you through.
Fantastic. And now that's pretty much all we have time for today. As it's 4:30, I know everyone's got lots to do. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. Again, we will be sending you through your own PD certificate to your email. If, again, you are sitting around in a staff room or a library, whatever the case may be, just send us through an email to support@ziptales.com, and we can send a PD to each of your staff members. So just make sure you send the email with the name of each staff member and their email address, and we'll make sure we send it out. Thank you very much, and thank you, Richard.
It's a pleasure, Steve. Pleasure.
And enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.